to our introduction to our first unit. This unit is on death. We're basing this unit on death for the simple reason that death is a universal experience. It's encountered by all human beings at some point in their life. Death is the ultimate mystery. Death makes us ask big questions. It's the ultimate unknown. For some, death is the gatekeeper to some sort of divine reward. To others, it's a gateway into oblivion. Death is predestined, pre-fated, something that is certain and coming for us in a particular way at a particular time. For others, it's totally random and arbitrary. To some people, death is the ultimate meaning maker, and to others, death makes life itself sort of meaningless. Death can be terrifying, comforting, the beginning, the end. Death is as enigmatic as it is omnipresent, and because of that, writers have fought with it and grappled with it since pen was first put to paper, or in some cases, charcoal to stone, or ink to papyrus. Through their works, writers often ask questions like, what does life mean? How does the knowledge of death affect that meaning of life? Is death to be feared or sought after? Is death in pursuit of a noble goal better than a random death by bus accident? This will be a difficult unit because we have to try to talk about these things in both a serious manner, but also without taking it too seriously because we don't want to bum ourselves out all the time. When writers write about death, they write characters who have to experience and grapple with death. One of the most difficult things in reading literature is coming to an understanding of the themes of a text. It's helpful to consider that themes generally gravitate towards the big questions in life. This makes death a particularly useful topic for exploring the themes of works. Many good texts have many good deaths, and those deaths probably have some sort of meaning to them. The hard part is that we are trained, and it's sort of ingrained in us, to look at the characters within our stories as people. And certainly that is a good way of reading texts and enjoying the texts. And please don't misunderstand. I want you to enjoy texts. We want to read books and be entertained and read poetry and find ourselves in them and be amused or emboldened or frightened by good works of literature. But that doesn't mean that characters actually are people. They're not. Characters, even characters in stories that are supposed to be memoirs, non-fiction, are creations of an author. And therefore, when we ask that ultimately important question of why did that character do that? There is no character for us to question or wonder about. There is only the author and the author's intentions. We'll go into all of this in much greater detail in our next intro video on psychoanalytical theory, but for now we want to introduce our essential question for this unit. How does literature, without providing scientific evidence, help us better understand or deal with death? Trying to understand these authors and what they have to say about death is a complicated and difficult process. The reality can be that sometimes we don't want to explore the difficult parts of text because it's hard, it's vague, it's uncertain, it doesn't have a clear and easy answer like a math question might. That brings us to tropes. Tropes are frequently appearing symbolic elements. Their consistent use throughout many different literary texts help guide us in understanding what an author is attempting to say. Most writers are very well read, and because of that, ideas have been put in their head. Even if they don't specifically intend to create a symbol, oftentimes they do anyway. Does every tree ever written about immediately signify growth for the text that it's within? No, probably not. But every author who writes about a tree has almost certainly encountered a poem or a text in which a tree did mean growth. And so somewhere that lingers in their psyche as they write their text. And they know as they put that tree into their text that it does sort of mean growth, even if it's not the entire purpose of their writing at that time. So when is it a symbol? It's always a symbol. We need to assume that poets don't have time to wax eloquent about spiders and wheelbarrows and trees and clouds and mermaids and rifles simply for no reason. The literal subject of the poem, and often the title of the poem itself, are usually your best avenue for exploring symbolic meaning. That a poem called Guns may be about those guns to some extent, but it's also about what those guns mean, and probably takes us into a discussion of masculinity and violence, warfare and power, domination. It's very important to note that a symbol must share qualities with the thing that it is signifying. This is what allows your English teacher to occasionally superciliously knock down a theory by someone in your class as they say, well, I think that the rock on the beach symbolizes man's futility in their quest for justice. Those are fancy sounding words, but what does a rock have to do with the quest for justice? A rock is hard, sedentary, can be used to hurt somebody, will be eroded eventually by the beach. Search for justice is more active. It's dynamic. It requires a measure of right and wrong and of understanding. There is no part of the rock that seems to share qualities with that quest for justice. Therefore, the rock makes a poor symbol. Let's think back to one of our absolute favorite texts of all time, I'm sure, Lord of the Flies. Simon in Lord of the Flies is a unique, kind, profound, meditative, empathetic character who is ultimately sacrificed by those who fear his message. These qualities, particularly that last one, make him an excellent Christ-like figure and able to signify Jesus within the text. His death, his sacrifice, his murder, however you want to look at it, says something dark and frightening about the boys when loosed of their civil bounds that generally laws and society create for them. Piggy, on the other hand, is intelligent, believes in the functionality of order, and is ultimately destroyed by the cruelty of those who reject rules. For those reasons, he would not make a good symbol of love. He doesn't share qualities with that abstract concept. So let's take a moment and talk about some of the repeated tropes and symbols that we are going to encounter all throughout this unit as we read about death. Winter is a great one. Winter is synonymous with snow, iciness, and numbness. Death also has a lack of feeling, a lack of warmth, and a lack of life, just like winter. So the coldness of winter is equated with the coldness of death. The iciness of winter is equated with the lack of emotion and connection once you have died. Nighttime is a good one. The darkness is frightening, just like the ultimate unknown that is death. We sleep at night, eyes closed, on our backs or face down on our stomachs, in a position that could be confused for death. This is so frequent that we have actually begun to call death the eternal slumber. Because this trope is so common, some of the other things that we would normally associate with nighttime also get associated with death. As we said, sleep, but so too twilight, as in your twilight years, generally considered to be the years as you age and get closer to death. Destination is a fun one. You know that movie Final Destination? What was the final destination? This is because there's another repeated trope, and that is life as a journey, or life as a road. Going all the way back to Odysseus, we see the notion that our lives are a journey that we go on. We encounter obstacles, bumps in the road, we take on passengers, we may occasionally hit a fork in the road and have to make a difficult decision, and ultimately, we are trying to get somewhere. The most ultimate somewhere is death. Because death and religion often intertwine, which is something we're going to explore more in our next unit, we need to be watchful for characters who might put us to sleep, who are clad all in black, who force us out into the snow, or who guide us on journeys. These characters may be God, the devil, some divine figure, both of them at once. They could even be death personified. These tropes and symbols are valuable to us because their recognition helps us understand what direction a text is going. If a poet guides his horse out into the dark, snowy night and pauses in the darkness to gaze into the depths, especially if later on they talk about their desire to go to sleep. Seeing and recognizing that a poem or a text deals with death even on a subtextual level helps us understand what the author is going for, and that helps us start to read for theme. Theme, of course, is one of the great bugbears of literature, that trying to figure out exactly what a poet or an author means seems difficult and scary. Writers tend to be intellectual heavyweights, after all. They think about things in a way that you and I generally don't. They think more deeply, they think more abstractly. Maybe they think more profoundly, but it is intimidating. Recognizing the common tropes of death will help us know what the writer is working on. And then we look at the characters. Remember those characters that we said aren't actually real people, but constructions of the author? If they go out into the snow, if they emerge from the darkness, if they find themselves casting off on a sea voyage out to an unknown horizon, those characters are encountering death as an obstacle. By paying attention to how they interact with death, we might get an idea of how the author thinks of death. So that's all we're trying to do here. We're just trying to figure out life and death. No big deal.